Okay, we're gonna slot a fingerboard, but first we have to get it ready for that. So this is a blank of ebony, and I'm gonna thin it, but first I'm gonna scrape the wax off the ends because that really clogs up the sanding belts. I'm gonna scrape it off. You just want to clean it up, leave it extra thick at this point, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut a wedge off here at the right. We're going to cut the fingerboard taper, and then that wedge we're going to use to make binding, and we want the binding to be taller than the thickness.
We're going to make the binding out of the fretboard.
Yeah, then it matches perfectly. Ooh, that's cool. Because we don't have a CNC machine to just like and leave the edges.
Nice. Okay.
So next we have to look at the grain and decide which edge you want to be one of the edges of the fingerboard. So sometimes the grain's going kind of diagonal and you can use that to your advantage. In this case I'm probably going to...
Yeah, the funny thing is it's on the camera. You know what you see?
Nothing?
You see the standing lines. The standing lines
yeah,
are not the same.
Look this way.
Yeah, it's not the same as the grain lines.
No. If you look from this side, this is probably straighter with the grain, this direction, although there's a lot of mineral streaking. I don't know if you can see this, these white flecks. Those are mineral deposits in the wood. And I think I'm going to try to avoid those by using this edge and then cutting a chunk off.
Okay.
So I'm going to make this the skinny edge, skinny end, wider end over here. I'm going to joint this.
Okay.
Okay. I jointed that other edge to my line, so now I have the right taper. I just might be a little bit thick or thin, or the width might be a little bit off. I just have to find where the nut is going to be, so where it's 41.5 millimeters. So I can use this actually a little bit up, right there.
5,
right there, about there. This is where my nut is. There.
Alright.
I mean, I guess I could transfer it. Maybe I will do that. Transfer it to the edge.
Just to give you myself an idea.
Then I don't have to do it again.
Cool.
Okay, 7 millimeters.
Alright, so that's then down to 7.
Then down to 7. This is a bit of a pro tip, but I can put the fret slots on this side, or I can put it on this side, right? But there is one side. But one side will be easier to plane down the fingerboard. So the grain is either going up or down. Very seldom it's running straight with the grain. So if you look at the edge of the fretboard and look at where the pores are going in the wood,
Yeah.
you can usually tell which direction the grain's going. So when you're planing down the fingerboard, obviously you don't want to go down into the grain.
Do you think I'd be able to capture that on camera?
This one is a terrible example because it's curly.
Okay.
The grain is like, I wouldn't be able to plane this. It's going to be sanding. But I can see the grain goes up, down, up, down, up,
Okay.
down, up, down, up.
So there's another pro tip for you.
Yeah, no, don't try to plane a fingerboard that's
Kind of
got wavy grain. Yeah. So in this case, it doesn't matter. It looks like maybe there's more grain going this direction than that direction, so I'm gonna fret this side. So I like to put little lines on there. I know the frets have to go on that side.
Yeah, like putting double-sided tape on is nothing.
Okay. Now we can go to the table saw. So now I've set this fence up so that it's on my spacer that makes this angle right for a 8.5 millimeter taper fingerboard from the nut to the 12th fret. So I know that's angled properly. Ideally this knife edge would be right over top of the blade because it just makes it easier to understand what's going on. I want to line where my nut is going to be, which I've marked, right? That's where my nut's going to be. And then because this is where my nut is going to be on my template, right? So if I can line these two up like this, then I will be cutting in the right spot relative to where the nut is. So this is a little bit different. Okay, so I have double-sided tape. I'll take that off. It's a little bit tricky. Slide it in there. And then I want to stick it to my fingerboard blank. Leaving the fingerboard just a little bit proud because I want the fingerboard to sit against my fence, not the template, right? Because the fingerboard's the important part. So that's stuck. Now, when I slide into the nut slot, I'm lined up with my line there. So I know I'm going to cut in the right spot.
Okay, so the blade lines up with the line there that you drew, and
Yeah.
that's when it's in there. Okay, cool.
Because every time I move, it's going to be
Yeah.
as far as...
So that's your offset right there. You just set
Yeah.
an offset.
Which is why it would make more sense if this was right over the blade, because then it's
Yeah.
so easy
why
to
didn't you do
understand. I don't really know. When I made this jig, I don't know.
You should.
But I haven't changed it, so
Alright.
my own darn fault. And of course, I've marked this is the side that I wanted the frets on, so I've put that down. So I'm not gonna go straight away and cut that because I don't know how deep my first cut is gonna be. I have to adjust the depth of my saw. So I have this not a ton of room to test, but I do have quite a bit. So I'm just gonna start by eyeballing it. What you want, I do like to go deeper slots, mainly because if you ever need to do a refret, or not a refret, but like a planing of the fingerboard, if that ever needs to happen, then you have more distance to go before you run out of fret slot for the frets to go down into, right? So that's just a trick that I learned from Sergey when I was apprenticing. I think it's smart. So I'm gonna try this. I aim to leave 3 millimeters of ebony after it's slotted. So the slot plus 3 millimeters, I guess you can say the slot is 4 millimeters deep. So here we go. So that's too deep. Quite a bit. 1.8. That's why you test. Closer. 2.5.
Shoot, that made it crack again.
Okay. Now we're getting there. Shower. 3.01. Good, right? Okay. So, I'll lock this lever on the table saw so it doesn't move up or down, because I know some. There.
Okay, because
So
it
now
can travel.
It can go up and down a little bit, yeah.
Alright.
Now, very important, actually here, this is a good tip, to use some wax. You won't want to use beeswax, but I don't know what you would want to use. It just acts as a bit of a lubricant, so the blade cuts nicer, so it's nice to, yeah. Okay. And then when you're cutting your slot, this is really important. You don't back the fretboard back through the slot. Or you don't cut forwards and then cut backwards through the slot.
And why not?
Because you're going to widen your slot.
Of course.
And then your frets start popping up.
Ah, of course.
So this fret blade is just the right thickness. I think it's 0.55 millimeters for this fret wire. And if you go forward then back, it's going to widen it. And yeah. Also, if you have a bit of wobble in your frets, and if you have a bit of wobble in your table saw,
Yeah.
sometimes you'll get the widening of the fret slots at the beginning and the end. So you'll want to make sure
Buy
that's
a new
not.
table saw.
Yeah, buy a new table saw. Yeah.
Oops.
Okay, so I'm gonna start. Go ahead. It's very important to keep the fretboard against your fence because that's your taper, right? You don't want to cut one or two
Right.
slots like this.
Right.
We're not doing a half fan fret, half regular.
Okay.
Fret. I'm not. Here we go.
Ta-da!
Next, very important tip.
Yeah.
Don't pull these apart like this.
Okay.
because you can very easily.
Twist them and stuff.
Yeah. Ow! Don't do that though. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to glue these binding strips on. These are wider than my fingerboard. So this is fairly important because when you glue these strips on, they have to be proud on the back. Otherwise you're going to have gaps. You can't have, you know, a fingerboard that has binding like this because this goes against your neck. Just a second. This goes against your neck. Then you have a space in there, right? So you want to make sure that binding is proud, and then you can scrape it down and flush it with the back. The top doesn't matter very much because you're going to be radiusing that. So even if it's a bit shy of flush with the top, then that's fine. So I'm going to start with this side just because. Actually, let's do it this side, and then you can see. I'm just gonna squish it into vise. I like to leave it sticking out quite a bit because then it's easier to get the tape down on the. You can use any kind of glue. I'm just using PVA glue, white wood glue basically. Then you just start to tape. Try to put your tape between the fret slots because you're going to want to clean these fret slots while the glue is still wet. And this whole time I'm making sure that it's proud on the back side. You always want to be proud of your back side. Yeah, we're proud everywhere. So I can take this out of the vise and clean up the glue. I do have a specially sharpened X-Acto blade, which is just a little bit of a hook at the end, which helps to scoop the glue out of the slots. So I'm going to start over here. That one doesn't matter, I'm going to cut it. So obviously you can tell I've still left this fingerboard a bit long, right? There's still those test cuts in there. I'm going to cut the end of the fingerboards on either end. Flush with, or using my fret, using the slot that I made as my guide to make it flush, so I can cut the binding flush with that slot as well. So this is important to take your time with because you don't want to hit anything with your frets. Bottom out your frets on a chunk of glue or something. I cleaned all the fret slots that were exposed. Now I'm moving the tape over where there was a fret slot under the tape.
Right.
And I'm going to clean those slots.
Okay.
So it's, I mean, it's a pretty simple process.
Right. And then you can add more tape on if you want, or you don't need to.
You can, but I don't usually. I don't think it's necessary.
No. Okay.
To do the other strip, you can't just clamp it in here because the binding's wider than the fingerboard, right? So you kind of have to support it on either side with some kind of stick so that the pressure is on the fingerboard, not the binding. I've got.
Now where do those sticks come from?
These are back center strip gluing calls. They came from the wall.
Really?
My jig wall, one of my jig walls.
Oh.
Once your glue is dry, of course, you can take the tape off, and we'll speed up this part so you don't have to watch me. Alright, so now the binding on the edges should be sticking out on the back side of the fretboard. On the top side of the fretboard, it doesn't matter because you're going to radius this fretboard. Assuming it's, I mean, even a classical, I guess you'd be planing it, but steel string, you're going to radius the fretboard and the edges are going to come down. So even if that binding isn't sticking up past the edge of the fretboard, that's okay. But the back, you need to get it flush with the back of the fretboard. So that's going to be the next step. We're going to clamp this in place gently because we don't want to wreck these binding strips. Just clamp it gently at first and get part of the fretboard there. Now there is some technique involved in this. Also, different scrapers. This Stumac scraper is great. They're nice and rigid, so you're not going to end up with flex, like a curve. So the main thing when you're scraping these bindings is you don't want to scrape them rounded like this because this has to glue against the neck. You want it to be flat all the way to the edges. So when I'm scraping this, I'm going to make sure that while I'm scraping this binding strip, I want to make sure that this part of the scraper is down, not up, tilted up. Otherwise I'm going to round it. So just gently like this. It also helps to angle the scraper inwards so that you're not going to chip pieces out as you're scraping. So I always angle it inwards. That's especially important on the other side of the fretboard, and I'll show you when I get there. So I'm getting close to flush, and because this is sticking up, I don't want to go all the way down, otherwise I'm going to still end up angled a bit. So I'm going to leave this side now and go on this side. Actually, I'll get a bit more. Okay, so now flipping it over, this side's less critical because I'm going to be radiusing this and leveling the board after it's glued to the guitar. Also, I don't have to worry about clamping this tightly because this is flat on the back now. So I can really reach down on the clamps. Now, one important thing is when you're scraping, you don't want to go lined up with the frets because you'll actually go bump, 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 bump into the fret slots, and it can round off all those slots. So always at an angle, similar to the back, but this is a bit more important on this side. You're also going to likely chip out the end of the fretboard, so if your fretboard's left long, it's a good thing, like this. So same thing, angled. And if you were wondering, this scraper is actually a hacksaw blade. They make great scrapers. These ones are nice and rigid. The wider the better, but these work really well. They stay sharp for a long time. Those cabinet scrapers that you can buy as cabinet scrapers, they go dull so quickly and they work terribly compared to these. So, yeah. There we have it. So now I can bring this over to the table saw and cut this at the nut slot. I want to cut right on this nut slot, obviously. So the idea is to catch that nut slot on the blade, that whichever fret slot that is. Okay, so there, I'm in it. See, I'll slide into it again here. There we go. It kind of locks in. Okay, so now I should be able to raise it a little bit into the slot. See, so I know it's in the slot there. I'm going to start it. Usually you don't start a table saw when you're against wood like this, but in this case I'm going to start the table saw and raise the blade, and then once the blade starts sticking up above the other side of the fretboard, I can go forward and backwards and cut through the fretboard. Okay, so here goes. This cut usually does some burning because it's rubbing up against the sides, but you can sort of see, let's turn this in light. Can you see that? You can actually see a little bit of the existing fret slot if you look closely. So you know it's cut very, almost exactly perfectly flush with where that fret slot was, which is great. So there we go. That's now cut on that end. If you wanted to, depending on how you want to do the end of your fretboard, I follow the shape of my sound hole. So I am going to cut this end later, but if you wanted to
have a square end,
yeah, you could cut it at this point. Now you could mark it, I guess you could cut it this way at this point, but you could mark it like this, cut it like this.
just remember you get your taper right.
Yeah, make sure you don't cut it this way,
Yeah.
otherwise it's going to be real crooked. Yeah, that's why I wrote nut and really big on here.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, if you wanted just a square end, you could cut it obviously here, wherever you wanted to cut it. And then you're done making your fretboard, other than position markers. If you just cut the end of your fretboard, if you're cutting it straight across, save that piece that you just cut off, because when you put position markers on the edge of the fretboard, you'll have a test piece to check your distance. from the back of the fretboard. So that is it for making a bound fretboard with no CNC. I'm using a table saw. I have a video on putting the position markers on the edge of the fretboard using no fancy tools. It's really just a block of wood on the drill press and a little wedge of wood. So if you want to see that video, that would be the next sequence for these fretboards, and I'll put the link right here.
Or in the...
Or in the description below. Maybe both. Thanks for watching. See you next video.